Hello and welcome back to Jules Bar Tools. In our session today, we are solving a rational equation by finding the LCD of the denominators in our fractions. And if you want to see how this is done, let's get started. In our equation today, we're going to be finding the LCD for our fractions first. Now in our first fraction, we have t minus 3 in the denominator, and in our second fraction, we have 4 in the denominator. And we will be finding the LCD for these two denominators. Now in looking at our denominators, we realize that there are no two terms that they have in common. So for our LCD, it will be made up of both of these parts of our denominator. So our LCD will be 4, and in parentheses we will put our t minus 3. So now that we have our LCD for our two fractions, we are now going to begin converting our fractions into their equivalent forms where both these fractions will have the exact same denominator. So let's start with our first fraction. And we are going to begin by multiplying our denominator to the LCD. And remember that I always tell you, whenever you are using rational equations and you have to find the LCD, not to expand the parentheses because it will make things complicated, but rather to leave the LCD as it is, so that when we get to this point, we can just cancel out our like terms wherever it is possible. So let's begin with our t minus 3. We're going to cancel t minus 3 here and t minus 3 in our LCD. And now multiply t times 4, which will equal to 4t. So our first fraction in its equivalent form is 4t. So now that we've changed that fraction into its equivalent form, we're going to do the exact same thing for our 3/4. And we will also multiply this to our LCD. And just like we did before, we will begin by canceling out the like terms wherever it's possible. So we'll cancel our 4 and our 4. And our 3 will be multiplied to our t minus 3 in parentheses. So my 3 times t will equal to 3t. And my 3 times negative 3 will equal to negative 9. So my 3/4 in its equivalent form will be 3t minus 9. So now that we have converted these fractions into their equivalent form, we're now going to just focus on the numerator and begin collecting our like terms to solve for our unknown variable t. So I'm going to collect my 4t minus 3t, which will equal to my negative 9, and 4t minus 3t will equal to t, so my t will be equal to negative 9. So now that we have solved our equation and we found that our t was equal to negative 9, we're now going to begin our substitution process, where we will substitute our t for negative 9 everywhere that it appears in our equation. And now we will begin to simplify our fraction to the left, where we're going to put back our negative 9, and negative 9 minus 3 will of course equal to negative 12 using our rules for integers, which tells us to add our like terms and keep the sign the same. So we added the numbers and keep the negative sign. So now that we have gotten to this point, what I'm going to do is, we could actually solve this in two different ways, but I'm going to focus on my left side, where I'm going to simplify this fraction by dividing it by negative 3. So my numerator and denominator will be divided by negative 3. And when negative 3 divides into negative 9, this will equal to 3. And when negative 12 is divided by negative 3, it will equal to 4. So we can see that in solving our equation, both sides are equal to 3/4. So that tells us that our t equals negative 9 is exactly the same. And with this fraction, I'm just going to make a little side note for you. You could have also solved this in another way. We use division for the left hand side. But remember that we are working with equivalent fractions here. So I divided on the left to make my fraction smaller, but I could have also taken the opposite approach on the right hand side, where I could have actually multiplied my 3 times negative 3 instead, and then my 4 I could have also multiplied to negative 3, which would have equal to 3 times negative 3 would be negative 9, and 4 times negative 3 would equal to negative 12. And you would have seen again that even though we use different approaches for different sides of the fraction, we still ended up with the exact same answer. So remember, with fractions, especially when we have equivalent fractions, we could also solve these questions by using division or multiplication. Either approach works, but remember that our end goal is to ensure that both of these fractions on both sides equal to the exact same amount. Okay, so I hope this was very helpful to you. I hope you were able to follow along easily to work out this question. I have several different videos loaded on rational equations in different forms and different types. So if you're working through these type of equations and you need help on different methods and different approaches for some of these questions, make sure that you follow along with my series on rational equation to get as much help as possible that you need. And I hope to see you again in the next video right here on Joe's Math Tools, where we make math easy.